I'm delighted to be here.
Hello. Thank you, Sue. Thanks. I am. This is such a treat for me because I really am a big, huge follower of yours. I look forward to your videos because I love how you present them. And I like it that you don't pull any punches. So thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you. And if you can hear the bell, yeah, here we go. I have company in my lap.
Of course,
So,
of course. Oh, how cute.
oh yeah, he's a camera is rolling. He doesn't care whose video it is. He's making an appearance. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, the spoilt little YouTube wannabe. Yeah.
oh, he's so
All right.
adorable. Oh, look at that. My
All right.
dog, she doesn't stand still. At least he likes to be on camera. Siri's too bossy, but he's so cute. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing
How is
just great.
Norway?
It's very cold. Yesterday was so beautiful, Sue, and today is just gray and starting to snow, kind of like hard snow.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah,
Well,
I
it's
can't wait to go.
Norway.
Yeah, 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 it is Norway, but yeah, I'm actually very pleased because the weather has been really nice. I love walking outside. So it's nice when it's sunny, but it's cold, because in Latin America, I can't walk anywhere because it's too hot and I have lupus. So, and it's too hot. It's not, oh my God.
Oh, he can't stand to be left out.
It's
So,
huge.
oh yeah, he's a good sized boy.
Oh my God, he's gorgeous. What color are his eyes?
They're sort of yellow green. It depends on the light. In some lights they look rather green. In some lights they look rather yellow.
He's so entitled. I kid you not. Oh my God, he's so entitled. I love it.
Oh, yeah, he's just we've got a
Oh
camera going and it's all about him.
my God, look
So,
at that. He's so cute. He's very cuddly. Oh my
oh yeah,
God.
yeah. All right, all
He
right.
wants attention, Sue. He wants attention.
And he wants to be a YouTube
Of
star.
course.
This is his goal in life.
You should actually do little videos of him, on YouTube.
I do. I end my videos with a little slideshow, and I have several of Audie. Mostly Audie with my neighbor Jane. He loves Jane, and she plays with him, and I'll get video of that. But yeah, he would like his own show, wouldn't you? But
So cute. I can't believe how big he is, though. What is his breed?
I have no idea. He is a stray. He
Oh,
simply
okay.
showed up at my door one day and said, I own you now.
That's
And
it.
that was
That's it,
it.
right?
He just took over the house.
Oh, he's really cute, and he looks very well taken care of.
Well, do you hear that? I take care of you. See,
Yes,
people notice.
look at that.
He
Look
is
at that.
just,
Oh, he's so cute. I swear to God, he's so cute. But anyways, let's get. I can't. I'm gonna keep staring at him. Please don't shoo him away. He's so
oh,
great.
oh, he'll be back. He'll
Oh,
be
okay,
back.
okay.
He can't stay away from a
I
camera.
miss my series. So she's very cuddly too when she wants to. She's evil most of the time, but I should have called her Megan.
Oh, well, if I had known how fond Audie was of being in front of a camera, I'd have called him Megan too.
That's true. So, anyways, today, guys, Sue's gonna give us a treat because she's gonna give us two little. We're gonna talk later. Will you tell me when you want to talk about those two things that you haven't talked about? But
Oh,
today
actually, it's three, but
it's three. Okay,
we're
yeah,
just
she's gonna
working
talk
them
about
in.
three of those things. Um, she's going to educate us about, and I love this topic because it's amazing how history repeats itself. So, and I remember somebody said to me, and my dad repeated it sometime. He said that history that is forgotten is liable to be repeated.
Oh, yeah.
you
George
know
Santayana. I think the way it went is those who won't learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. I hear a whole lot of versions of that, but it is so true. And what we have unfolding with Harry and Meghan is something that our grandparents' generation watched back in the 1930s with Edward and Wallace. And little did they know how bad it could get. So,
Again.
oh gosh. Well,
Mm.
I mean, it's up to us to be able to take that information, process it, and avoid what happened with Edward and Wallace, because the reality is a lot worse than most people know. Um, so why don't we just sort of start with
Oh, there we go.
Edward and George? Now I'm using their regnal names. Edward was actually known as David in his family, and George was known as Bertie. But we know them as Edward, the Duke of Windsor, and King George VI. So it's probably less confusing if we stick with that.
Yeah.
They were both born in the 1890s. They were the first two children of George V and his wife Mary. They were Prince and Princess of Wales when the boys were born. But because of things like birth order, they were the two first. They were followed by a sister, and their next oldest brother was something like 4 years younger than George. So those two were the ones who were together. They were the friends, they were the pals, they were the two eldest boys, and because they were born into a social strata where children were educated at home, at least for their early lives, uh, they had only one another for company. So yes, they were close. Now we're going to see that just maybe 10, 15 years after this picture was taken, they were mortal enemies. It's amazing things could shift so quickly and that they could become so polarized. But yes, it happened. So, First World War, the two of them were off sowing their wild oats, and they each seem to have a predilection for being involved with married women. George,
Really?
too, had
Really?
affairs. Oh, yeah. He had affairs. Lady Longborough, who I believe was from Australia, she was a socialite. I've never seen photographs of her, but I have seen a drawing, and she was just, boy, she was the 1920s version of hot. So he was involved with her, and family pressure caused him to end that relationship very shortly after he began courting Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, who he would subsequently marry. But Elizabeth was not his first love. It was Margaret Longborough. So, and well, in a weird kind of way, it would make sense if you're going to have an affair to have it with a married woman, because if you had an affair with an unmarried woman and anything went wrong, in other words, if she found herself in the family way, you could find yourself in a shotgun wedding or a lawsuit, because women could sue for breach of promise. If the man who ruined you wouldn't do right by you, you could take him to court. So, yeah, it was not as uncommon as it may sound for young men to have affairs with married women because they were safer. I consider it to be unfortunate, exploitative of the women, but still, it is what it is. That's the way they did it. So while we're on the subject of affairs, here's a really juicy little bit of news, gossip, slash, who knows, dirt. Yeah. When Edward was in the First World War, I'm sorry, First World War, he was in France and he took up with a French prostitute.
Oh my God.
Pardon?
Oh
Oh, yeah.
my God.
Oh no, prostitute. They usually refer to her as a courtesan,
Oh,
which is just a polite way of saying prostitute.
yes, of course.
And but there's no question about what she did for a living. Her name was Marguerite Alibert, and she was, well, as you know from the photos, she was just a very beautiful young woman. She was also considered to be very charming, and she was, well, she wasn't a streetwalker. She was
She's like a high period escort.
Basically, yes. And Edward was head over heels in love with her. And as with all of his mistresses, he wrote her copious love letters. Now, Edward's love letters, it's important to remember this is Edward we're talking about. His love letters were horrifically embarrassing. They were full of baby talk, they were infantile. But in the case of Marguerite, because it was the First World War and he was in the service, he shared some sensitive military information in these letters.
Oh, crap.
Oh, yeah. And he shared some uncensored opinions of his family. Well, eventually his relationship with Marguerite petered out and he moved on to greener pastures and wanted the love letters back. Marguerite was this was a working girl. She knew what she had and she wouldn't give them up. And this
Mm.
troubled him. He actually wrote to friends about it, saying, I just need to get those letters back. Time passes. And a few years later, Marguerite married an Egyptian prince. And that was Kamel Fani. And and you have a picture of him as well. He was a very well-to-do Egyptian. Well, we would say prince. They would say bey. So, and they got married, had a very tempestuous relationship, which ended rather suddenly in 1923 in London in the Savoy Hotel when Marguerite shot him dead.
Oh, crap.
She's standing over her husband's body, smoking gun in her hand, quite literally. And
Mm.
there's nowhere for her to go. I mean, this she was caught dead to rights, but she had those letters.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and it was her get out of jail free card. The British government wanted the letters back. They did not want the Prince of Wales involved in this because, of course, he had been involved with her. And so, in exchange for an acquittal, she turned over the letters. Now, keep in mind, her only possible defense was self defense, was the
Yes.
only thing she could say because she couldn't say she didn't do it. She was caught red handed. So her claim was that he had sexually assaulted her. Now, a woman who has been a prostitute is going to have a hard time, especially in the 1920s,
Yeah.
pulling off a defense like that. So they never introduced any information about her past, although it was there. She was rather notorious in Paris for her profession.
Of course.
So they managed
Isn't
to
it
pull it.
amazing, Sue? Isn't it amazing how you know what I keep saying, because people keep saying, what does Meghan have over the royal family? I mean, the royal family has been covering things up for a long time because basically what Edward did was treason, disclosing secrets to a third party that he wasn't supposed to disclose. That is treason.
Oh, it gets better than that, but I'll save that one for later. Well, actually, it doesn't get better; it gets worse. Um, yeah, believe me. What the information he shared with Marguerite was absolutely nothing compared to what he did in the Second World War. But we're still a ways away from that. Anyway, yeah, so she got off. Uh, Now, in Marguerite's defense, I will say she went on to have a very long life. And to the best of my knowledge, she never murdered anyone else. So, hey, she clearly wasn't a danger to society, as subsequent events proved. But yeah, she was who she was. She
I
was a working girl pretty much to the end of her life. And it's just it's astounding that a cold blooded murder could go
I'm funny.
unchallenged. Being involved in an affair with the Prince of Wales was literally a get out of jail free card. And this becomes important later because this was a very well known scandal at the time. We don't know much about it now, but at the time it was well known. So
Mm.
Wallace would have known this. So
Yeah.
when she came along, gets into Edward's life, she clearly understood that being in bed with Edward didn't just mean money and jewelry, and she did love her jewelry.
Mm.
It meant you were untouchable, even after the affair ended, because Edward and Marguerite had not been involved for a good 5 years when the murder took place. But Wallace, yes, this is Wallace when she was around, I think 19 is that picture. When she was a young woman, she was actually rather pretty. What we saw, what the world saw with Wallace was Wallace at 40. And she was one of those women who was pretty, 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 and then just suddenly sort of the bottom dropped out.
Ooh.
She started looking,
I just want to give a parenthesis. You know that Meghan Markle's new eyebrows look like that?
oh God.
Yeah. Haven't you seen her? We've been all talking about the eyebrows.
Well, her eyebrows are scary.
No, but
In
now it's
Wallace,
very different because they go like this, like all the way down, just like Wallace. Right now that I'm watching that picture.
Wallace's eyebrows were scary because in the 1920s, that's what eyebrows looked like. That was the fashion. My grandmother's eyebrows looked very much like that in her photographs from that period. But yeah, who knows? You don't suppose Meghan's trying to be a 1920s it girl? I was just trying to be everything else, so why
I
not?
don't know, but her eyebrows, Sue, it looks so much like that. I'm gonna try and get a picture to show it to you. But anyways, continue.
I'll dig out some pictures of her eyebrows when she was a teenager, and they were very, pencil line thin
Yeah, they're like
1920s.
cholas. We call them cholas. You know, it's a very Latin thing that they look like very gang thing.
Oh my.
Yeah,
Not
it's
very
very Spanish
attractive in my
thing. It's very
opinion.
Hispanic thing. It's really Hispanic thing that they do that. You know, like but it's mostly the women in gangs. They're very much chola like. You know, so it's very weird. You know,
I
so
I don't get the appeal of it, but what can I say? I don't get the appeal of wrinkled clothing either, and that seems to be Meghan's brand. So who
yeah,
knows? Her sensibilities are different from mine. I guess that's the best I can say.
yeah.
This picture, by the way, is uh, this is from the period when Edward and Wallace were actively involved in their affair. A lot of people have mistaken this for Wallace's wedding dress. It's not. This was from her presentation at court in London in the 1930s, and this would have been around 1933, give or take. So, as you can see, she was not as gaunt and haggard as we later saw. So, yes, she was a little more appealing when Edward first hooked up with her. So, oh God.
But look at the eyebrows. I mean, they've gone because before they used to be high up and they're getting bushier here and all the way down. People have been actually commenting about that, which is really weird. Like, really weird that she's gotten that. I just
I
wanted to
don't
show.
know. I have no explanation for the weird changes she makes in her look. I I honestly I don't know. I think she could be a lot better looking than she is. Uh, well, I don't know what to say. Nobody can tell Meghan anything. She gets her own ideas, and I understand she's got a new stylist. And who knows? Maybe this is somebody she'll actually listen to. Oh yes, this was Wallace. What was this? This would have
30,
been
this is 31 you wrote.
That would have been around the time of her first divorce. So that was like 1927. And
It will show her
she
at
was,
the first marriage.
yes, she was very stylish. Um, yeah, but let's see, it was around the time of her first marriage and just as she was about to marry the second time. Wallace had a lot of overlap in her relationships.
That's
Yeah,
her, right?
that's her with her first husband. And
She
that
looks
was,
so different though, Sue. She really looks different here.
well, she was barely 20 there.
Yeah.
Um, that, yes, I'm pretty sure that was when she was barely 20. So she married rather young, 20 years old, I think. Her husband, that's Win Spencer, he was the first husband. He was a pilot. And they they were together for about 5 or 6 years. They were married for, I think, 10 or 11 years, but they were separated for the latter half of the marriage, and she had moved on. Wallace had a lot of overlap in her relationships. She was virtually known for it, which is something she has in common with
So
Meghan.
you know what is so familiar of Meghan? I mean,
Yeah,
this is incredible. Literally the story history is repeating itself. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, so she had
exactly.
a lot of overlap with it. Wasn't he abusive towards her?
Well, I don't think so.
Oh, you don't? Because the story was that he was.
Well, here's the thing. He did drink, but if he had actually abused her, I do not believe she would have just walked away and left the marriage intact. If he had given her grounds for divorce when they were actively living together, I do not believe for an instant she would not have taken advantage of that. In those days, if you wanted a divorce, you had to have a reason.
Yeah.
And adultery was almost always a reason. Spousal abuse was not necessarily a reason. In fact, I think even in New York, wife beating, if you will, was not grounds for divorce until I don't think it was grounds for divorce until they went over to no fault divorces.
Mm,
So it
yes, sir.
depended on the jurisdiction.
Mm.
But if she had the grounds, I believe she would have taken it. And I do not think Wallace was the sort of person, even when she was young, even in her 20s, I don't think she was the sort of person who would have tolerated some man whacking on her. This is her second husband, um, and this is Ernest Simpson. Um, Now, as I said, this is not a wedding picture, although a lot of people assume it was. No, this they were already well married at this point, and this is when she was presented at court. So, yeah, there you have it. Oh, and by the way, everyone talks about Wallace as the twice divorced American. Oh no. That just so undersells the scandal. She was not a twice divorced American during the abdication scandal. She was a once divorced American. She and Ernest were still married. They were still living together in as far as they did. He was a shipping executive, so he traveled a great deal, but they had not in any way separated. She did not even file for divorce until 6 weeks before Edward signed the abdication papers.
Oh, wow.
So when people say, well, what's the big deal? She was twice divorced. No, the big deal was the King of England was saying, I would like to marry another man's wife. That's a big deal. That would be a big deal today. So
Yeah.
imagine what kind of big deal it was in 1936. Oh, yeah, she's married. I still want to marry her. What he was talking about was bigamy. And how else can you interpret that? Of
Yeah.
course, To be fair, here's the thing with Edward. To be fair, Edward was definitely not the sharpest knife in the drawer. None of them were. Neither was George. They were both, well, they were both intellectually limited. The
Yeah.
royal family in the UK, they peaked intellectually in the 16th century, and it has been downhill from there. You just don't see a lot of shining lights in that family. And George and Edward were absolutely typical of that family. They were just not bright. George, for example, graduated like dead last in his class in the Naval Academy.
Hmm.
So these these were just not bright guys. And the British government spoke about it. We have their correspondence. So today we have all of the records of all of the opinions of people like Anthony Eden and Winston Churchill. And it's like, yeah, they were considered, both of them, to be pretty dull witted.
Hmm.
So once again, we've got another parallel because Harry, my gosh, he makes a village idiot look smart by comparison. So, you know, it's embarrassing. It
It
is.
is. It is very much so.
So, what we have at this point, as we've taken it forward, we've gone up to the abdication. And once we get to the abdication, at this point in time, we have the split between Edward and the throne, Edward and his brother George. And we have nothing short of chaos. Remember, Wallace is still married. Edward has abdicated. Her divorce was not final until 6 months after he abdicated. So they eventually marry. I I have no idea what was going on in Wallace's mind. They've unearthed a lot of love letters to her husband Ernest that
Mm.
indicated she didn't want the divorce. Well, I don't think she went into the relationship looking for marriage. How could she? She was married to someone else. And even though divorce was certainly possible, Wallace already had one. And
Yeah.
so did her husband, Ernest. He had divorced his previous wife to be with Wallace. It just wasn't what one expected. You don't show up with one husband and say, well, I think I'll marry this guy instead. The idea that she would eventually become Queen of England could not have been in her thinking. It wouldn't have been realistic. Wallace was, my great aunt and my grandmother both knew her slightly, which is to say, they met her on occasions. My great aunt thought very highly of Wallace. She said that she was charming, she was intelligent, she was witty. Wallace always addressed her by name, never forgot my great aunt's name, even though they were only the most casual of acquaintances. My grandmother, on the other hand, said that she was a vulgar, scheming social climber and Jew baiter. She always threw that one in somewhere. Jew,
And what Jew baiter?
Jew baiter, that was the word they used for anti Semitic people. You
Oh,
know, that
okay, okay, okay.
if you dislike Jews. My grandmother said that Wallace would never she would never waste an opportunity to tell you that all the world's problems were the result of the Jews.
Oh my
Edward,
God.
by the way, same thing, which is one of the reasons my grandmother absolutely despised both of them,
Yeah.
and uh, she just didn't have a kind word to say about either one of them.
Mm.
My great aunt, on the other, and the two women, my grandmother and my great aunt, were sisters.
Okay.
My great aunt thought Wallace was just lovely, just so lovely. My grandmother thought my great aunt was a little touched in the head, but it, it does show that Wallace, like Meghan, was one of those people who can appeal
Love
very
bomb people. They can
strongly.
love bomb people.
Yeah, and they can have a very strong appeal for some people. Meanwhile, others are looking at them. In my grandmother's case, it was cutting through the superficial charm
Yeah.
and going underneath and saying, you know, my God, this is a woman who was fine with the idea of millions of Jews being
Yeah.
gassed in the war. You know,
Yeah, they
so
went to see Hitler, right? They went to see Hitler
oh
and
yeah,
everything.
oh yeah. Well, that brings us to the Second World War. Now, this little tidbit, and it is out there. There is absolute proof of this. Um, when you were saying Edward, by releasing military secrets to his mistress, was a traitor, no, I can top that one. Edward told Hitler and the German High Command that the best way to make peace with England in the early days of the war was to bomb London into the Stone Age. It wasn't just the Germans. This same uh, sentiment that he was expressing was not only in documents that the Germans had kept, but the Spanish ambassador had written the same thing to Franco. The Duke of Windsor tells Hitler that if he wants peace,
Basically annihilate his own land. It's basically kill
oh,
everybody.
40,000 people died, mostly civilians, died in the Blitz. 40,000 London civilians. Well, not just London, but. And Edward was like, just keep it up. Hard bombing will bring them to the peace tables. That is, if you stop and think about it, it's sickening. I find it physically nauseating.
And this is why I've heard about that, Sue. And this is why I don't understand why this man was not tried for treason and hung, because back then they would hang people for treason. Because it was so obvious because of the letters and everything, that they uncovered, that to me. And this is, one of the things that I say to people, if when people are not and asked, they say, what does Harry, Meghan have with the royal family? The royal family have a history of covering things up for their own,
Absolutely.
and as long as Meghan is with him, or even if Meghan is not with him, they're still gonna cover up for her. Look how they cover up for Fergie.
Yes. And remember, Marguerite Alibert had not been Edward's mistress for 5 years. Still, get out of jail free, shoot your husband, and walk away. Uh,
Yeah.
the information about Edward's,
Treasonous
well,
act.
treason. All right. Yes.
It was
Yes.
treason.
There's no
That's
question about it.
treason because he also wanted to become king, right?
That seems to have been part of it. He either wanted to be king because the Germans offered to put him on the throne, or it is possible he had grander aspirations. The Germans were talking New World Order. They were going to create Europe as like one giant consolidated nation. And he would presumably be a major player in that. So, yeah, King of England, that could have been small potatoes next to being the emperor of all of Europe. He absolutely thought he was going to, oh gosh, yes. He absolutely thought he was going to be put on the throne. Um, what we have when we start looking at this is
It's revolting, Sue. It's revolting for reals.
it's a lot worse than that. They have photos out there of Edward teaching little Elizabeth, his little niece who later became queen, teaching her to give the Nazi salute. And there's film of that.
Yeah.
The British don't like that one because it does show a tiny little Queen Elizabeth when she was the princess, you know,
Yeah,
just
she didn't know any better. She thought
of
her
course
uncle was
not.
teaching
She
her
was a
something.
child. She did what her uncle told her to do, but the optics are bad. And I will admit that the optics are bad. But he was he was a crackpot. He had he shared Hitler's beliefs in, the master race, that some people were just inherently superior to others. And of course, now white Anglo-Saxon Protestants were superior. So yeah, there you go. Uh, it was pretty scary. His interest in going back to England, which he continued to pursue that agenda pretty much throughout the war. They they made him governor of Bahamas to get him out of Europe because, first of all, he was actively consorting with the Nazis, as you can see. There's no question. But
I
this
just
was
wanted to show you something. So see Wallace looking straight at the camera, just like Meghan, always looking at the camera.
Wallace. mm, Wallace was very conscious of her public image, very much just like Meghan.
Yeah.
So they sent him off to the Bahamas because in Europe, first of all, he was consorting with everyone, doing these pseudo royal tours. Remember, at this point, when he was first sent out of England, he had no official position in the British government, but he was going out touring the Maginot Line and reviewing the troops, the same sort of thing Harry does here.
Yeah, right. It's like they don't want to let go. And he was a huge critic of and he used to mock the royal family and the monarchy. Yet he, just like Meghan right now at the barbecue thing, that they sent their secretary to let them know that Harry and Meghan were going to tour the barbecue place. I mean, it. Ah,
Yeah, they doing these quasi royal tours. They what they did, and this is one of the things I find most disturbing, is Wallace and Edward were set on creating a competing royal family. They were going to create their own little satellite monarchy, wherever it was they were. And Edward would still go out, with the pomp and the circumstance, and review the troops, and people would salute him and they would curtsy to him and call him sir and whatever. Now, none of that was supposed to be happening, but the British government did nothing to stop it.
just like now.
Exactly. And at that time, to be fair, back in the 1930s and early 40s, they didn't have any template for this. They had never had a former king still alive. It was the first abdication, still alive and still wandering the streets. This was brand new for them. So they didn't know what to do. Now, as we look at this 80 years later, they know what to do with Harry, and they know exactly how to do it. They also know, remember, 40,000 dead in the Blitz. They also know what can happen when you let your royals run around pretending that they represent the nation, feeding information to your enemies, or maybe
Mhm.
your friends, who knows. The Spanish government, as I say, that was one of the sources for
Just
this
like Harry did with
information.
indigenous people in Canada. I mean, I saw your video. Oh, thank God you did it, because if I'd done it, I would have been shouting and yelling, and people think that I'm almost about to have a heart attack. So I'm glad that you did it.
Well, it was appalling. It was absolutely appalling. And on so many levels. You know, uh,
But the
you
palace hasn't done anything, Sue.
Someone needs to. That's the thing. Someone needs to. The British know what they are up against because they saw it before. And before, what they did was they hid the information. They didn't just hide it, they went to the US because these records that were recovered after the war were not just recovered by Britain, they were recovered by the Americans and the British. And we're a lot better at stealing documents than the Brits, no matter what the James Bond movies tell you. You
Yeah.
know, you want somebody to steal documents, you find an American. The Americans had the documents that proved Edward had conspired with the Germans to have his own country bombed. They had it.
Mm.
They still have it. The British asked the Americans to destroy the documents. The American government was very close to it, but American historians, and there was a small group of historians, it's not as if the documents were handed off to every university in town. There was a small group of historians. They fought and said, no, that can't be done. So, what the Americans decided to do instead was they would hold them until after everyone involved was dead, guaranteeing that Edward would never be held responsible for what he did.
That's really bothers me though, because instead
Of
of
course,
ridding the monarchy of shitty people like that, they commit another crime by covering it up.
of course, of course. And the British, I give the British the lion's share of the responsibility because they were the ones who came to the Americans and said, you have to do this for us. But that doesn't let America off the hook for doing it. Fortunately, like I say, American historians said, no, you cannot destroy this. You must keep it. And so it was sort of a compromise position. Uh, I don't think it was good enough. I think the information should have come out immediately.
He should have
Uh,
been hung.
I would have been perfectly contented just to let the information out there and let nature take its course. My
Yeah, I
father,
think he would have been killed by somebody in the UK,
that's
given the
right.
sentiment.
My father and my grandfather were both in England. They both served. My grandfather was in London during the Blitz. There was a period of 2 months when they bombed London every single day for 2 months. He was there very briefly, of course, because you couldn't
Mhm.
stay there during that period. And my father was in England after the Blitz at the end of the war. And they both insisted this was the most horrific thing you could imagine. My father said it would be like looking at downtown Boston. We lived in Boston at the time. It would be like looking at downtown Boston and seeing it in rubble. It would be like watching you sitting in the middle of the street playing with unexploded ordnance. It was horrifying to them. So,
I've
yeah,
been through wars. The thing is, I've been through wars, given my background. I've been through wars and I've been to war zones, and it's not a pretty thing. So the fact that this man went unpunished to me and the thing is, Sue, you know this, that it's something called aggravated crime. It's because they're in a position of trust and much higher. So they
yeah,
should know better because they're in that position.
absolutely. It's not just the crime, it's the breach of trust. This is a person who has done something. Uh, it is a higher level of betrayal.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I would have been happy, like I say, if they just put the information out there because someone who lost their entire family in the Blitz would have taken care of the problem for all of us.
Oh,
It
yeah.
would have been that simple. And I do believe that was much of the thinking in the US when they decided to go along with the British request and conceal the information, because certainly, you know, well, that's the American mindset. If you bomb our city, we are going to go after you with a gun. But no, it I don't even understand how Edward could have looked in the mirror, how he could have slept at night, how anyone who knew that this happened could do anything but spit on his shoes. Boy, by the way, that's another one of my grandmother's expressions. It was all I could do not to spit on that man's shoes. Well, between the bombing and I don't know how much she knew about his involvement in the Blitz. It's very likely she knew quite a lot because my grandfather he was attached to the general staff at that time. So he was a career military officer, and they were just a good old boys club. So he probably knew at least something. My grandmother just blamed Edward for the Holocaust, that all of these people dead, and all Edward could say, well, it's a good start. So she she found she found him to be not worth the air he was breathing. Same with Wallace.
Yeah,
But
he went to he still was allowed to keep the royal title and to a
yeah,
large degree many privileges.
well, not to mention a very healthy allowance.
Yes.
All of the prestige that came from being the former king. And it would have been for the best, in my opinion. Justice would have been served if
Yeah.
the information got out there and nature took its course. I would have been fine with that.
So it's funny that you mentioned that they've had already when the Duke of Windsor did this, they didn't have like a way to handle it, right? But
No.
you would think that now. And I know what people are going to say. I know I'm going to get some sugars here in the video saying, "Oh, but Harry didn't commit treason." Yes, he has. He has. He has. And there's a lot of things we don't know about. Like the fact that he went and lied about the Commonwealth, incited hatred by falsely claiming racism. And not just now. I mean, Meghan, who won't let go of trashing the United Kingdom, went on that chat or whatever she did in Texas and claimed that she was bullied in the United Kingdom while pregnant. That's the first time that she ever talks about that. Nobody bullied her. It was us YouTubers calling out that coat flicking of that moon bump, which is not normal. And I actually did a video today, Sue, and I talked about it because when you're pregnant as a mom, you know, I don't know, and I can honestly say I've seen many of my friends do that. We don't expose the belly, not because we're embarrassed, but it's just a protective thing. It's like even if it's a dress, you're always protecting. It's like you want. It's something that I couldn't help it. Like I would put a coat on. It's like I felt that I was protecting Henrik, my son, right? But Megan is like exposing the child. It felt like it's like it's something very I don't know, something is primitive. I don't even know how to explain it,
Well, look, I've done uh, I've discussed this topic on videos, and I do not believe I'm virtually to the point of certainty that the public pregnancy with the putative child Archie, I do not believe that was her and her belly.
I don't think so either.
I
And
completely
I'm not being conspirational here. It's just that things don't add up. You know,
exactly.
don't add
Uh,
up, and
yeah.
they don't. They really don't. And there's one thing that people don't understand. That's security protocol, and this is going to tie in your history of what's his name, Duke Windsor, and the history that we're seeing now unfold before our eyes. And it's like their security, the royal security, the security protocol mandates, it's mandatory. This is not something that they can, we're going to think about it. No, as soon as the royal woman goes into labor, they immediately must notify the monarch, because for a lot of security thing has to go into place. They have to secure the place where they look what happened with Sophie, that she almost died. So they have to secure the place. I mean, it is a whole, even if it's an emergency thing, they already have things in place. So it's not like Harry's security guards would have said, oh, we're not going to notify the palace, because palace was not notified. They got the time wrong. So either Harry lied to his police officers, the security people who were driving him back and forth to give, or they disobeyed a very, very, because that's a direct disobeyed order not to notify the monarch immediately when they're on their way to the hospital.
Well, there are so many stories they've put out about the pregnancy and the birth and Harry sucking on the nitrous oxide. And it just, some of it is just so insane. And they've put all these stories out. And that is my main argument with what's going on. They have lied and lied and lied. Why should we believe anything they say? The simple fact is, Paula, if you did nothing but lie to me day in and day out for years, would you really expect me to believe you if you told me the truth now? I wouldn't expect you to believe me. The fact is that they have no credibility. Now, I had believed at the beginning when I started looking at the, you know, alleged pregnancy that maybe she was really pregnant, but she's all about the optics. So she had to come up with this massive, giant belly because that's the way they do it in the movies. You see someone in the movies, the day they find out they're pregnant, their belly is sticking out, so it's almost in Detroit. They That's just the way it is. And she is very superficial like that.
Yeah.
So she would want the massive belly. Maybe she just padded the belly. I don't
I
know.
want to show you this, Sue. I don't know if you've seen this. This is, people assume that the kids automatically get the title. That's not it. The queen has to confer it through the monarch has to confer it either verbally and then with a letters patent written.
Yeah.
This is Louis, Prince Louis. What the royal family, the monarch needs to attach in order for the letters patent to be legal, right? So you have the birth announcement and they have the links. This is the British royal family letters patent, right? You have 23rd of April, 2018. And here you have all the medical staff for Prince Louis, the household, everything,
Yes.
right? Then you have Monday 23rd, you have the Duchess of Cambridge has been delivered of a son. Notes to editor, the medical staff in support were blah, 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 blah. A formal notice of the birth will be posted on the forecourt of Buckingham Palace in due course, which it was done pretty much almost immediately with the signature of the people, right? And here you have more of the announcement, right? You're going to see the one for Archie. You're going to see the one for Archie. I kid you not. Okay. Okay. That's it. And not only me, I mean, other YouTubers have requested a copy of because that should be public in order for one of the things before it used to be mandatory. They used to be a law until 1948, right? And then because they did away with that law, in exchange, they had an agreement, gentleman's agreement or protocol, that the easel with the signature of the doctors who were present or delivered the child would be put up forth because information has to be public to rely transparency
Yes.
and security to the public that they're not being swindled, right? I haven't been able to get that.
Absolutely.
I haven't been able to get that. We can't even get the baptism certificate in London because they said that they don't want to give the names of the godfather and of the child. And I've asked for it to be blacked out. I just want a certificate that he was indeed baptized on that day. We still don't get it.
I don't understand why not revealing the godparents would be such a big deal. Now, King Constantine recently passed away. It was just a few weeks ago, not even maybe. And he was William's godfather. This wasn't a secret, this was out there in the open. Why would children's godparents be a secret? Now, historically, uh, the godparents of a child were part of the child's public family. These were the people in the community who were, well, within the Catholic Church, of course, the godparents are the ones who are responsible for making sure the child is raised in the faith, et cetera, et cetera. But it is a social relationship, a public relationship, a compact with society. The idea of keeping godparents secret, there is no religious reason for this, and many religious reasons not to do this. And beyond that, it's why would it defies explanation to keep a child's godparents secret. It's that simple.
How do you think though the Duke of Windsor, like you were talking, and that's history, part of history, ties in with these two brothers right now, and Meghan Markle and Prince?
Oh, absolutely. We have two brothers now who started off very close, just as Edward and George did. Um, they started off life with a side by side trajectory. And basically, a woman came in and tore it apart. Now, if you want the parallels, William was already married to Catherine when Nutmeg came on the scene. And meanwhile, back in the 1930s, George was already married to Elizabeth, already had his little children. Remember, Elizabeth was like 10 years old at the time of the abdication.
Yeah,
Margaret would have been 4 or 5, I think.
yeah,
So one brother is already married, established, has children. The next brother brings in the wife, and bang, everything falls apart. So we have that parallel. I don't think Wallace intended to fracture the British royal family. I think she just wanted loads of jewels and loads of money and probably that get out of jail free card that Marguerite Alibert had, just knowing that the British government would protect her until the end of time simply because she had once been Edward's mistress. That, gosh, there's a lot to be said for that. I don't think it was her intent to shred people. With Meghan, obviously she wanted to be the star of the show, and she was perfectly willing to scorch the earth if she didn't get what she wanted, because she's stupid and short sighted. So, let's not lose sight of what I said about the royal family peaking out intellectually in the 16th century.
yeah.
Meghan is shrewd, but she is not smart. There's a huge difference. Wallace was also shrewd, but Wallace was smart.
You and I
Well,
are in complete agreement with that. I hear all the time. So, oh, Megan is such a smart woman. If she were smart, she wouldn't find herself doing a round in Texas, XXW. You know what I mean? She would be in a different position with Harry.
she's shrewd, and that it's easy to confuse cleverness and that sort of animal cunning that
Cunning.
Meghan has with intelligence. It's very easy
Yeah.
because she worked very hard to grab the brass ring, but that's shrewd. She couldn't keep it because that's stupid. A shrewd person can maneuver and manipulate and get something, but it takes brains to hold on to it.
Yeah. And develop it in a positive manner.
And she didn't. She basically just wet
Squandered
the
it.
ball, you
Yeah.
know. And it's in a lot of ways it's sad, but I think the lesson to be learned from the two brothers, from George and Edward, and from Harry and William, is the breach was irreparable.
Yeah.
George would not see his brother. Eventually, he stopped taking his phone calls because he was tired of the crap and the drama. He was in the middle of World War II, you know, which is a nice way of saying he had bigger fish to fry. Meanwhile, his brother was just whining and whimpering and playing the victim, because that's something that
My God, they're so much the same, aren't they?
victim, victim, victim. Yeah, but you were not giving my lovely wife the respect she deserves, and blah, blah, blah.
Well, we leave
So,
England
yeah,
and we go to California.
we're going to go to California. But we still want. We still want. And of course, now that Harry is saying he's willing to step back in, remember, Edward said the same thing. He renounced the throne and then said, well, if you need me, I'll come back. That's the dangerous part, because you have two competing branches of the same royal family. And it's confusing for the average person to figure out, is this someone who is representing the government, the UK, the crown, whatever? Or is this just someone half cocked, a loose cannon on their own?
I have
Well,
to ask you, I have to ask you, what is the what is the is there any difference in approach back then to now from the palace? Because I don't see any.
no, I don't either. I don't either.
So you don't think they're gonna have any consequences or anything like that?
Oh, I
Because
think it's
there's
probably
a big
going to go
difference.
down.
There's a big difference. Before we didn't have internet. Now I see a pin drop here. I take a picture of it and I post it and it's all over the world. Before they were able to manage that information and even bury it.
I think that Harry and Meghan are just going to continue to get this free ride until eventually the public finds them no longer entertaining. Wallace and Edward just sort of gradually faded into the night. Uh, by the 1960s, they were holding receptions in New York department stores. That was the extent to which they were
That's
selling
pretty much where
wardrobe.
Meghan is. Touring barbecue restaurants in Texas.
Exactly. We've seen this before, merchandising the titles. And Wallace and Edward did this. Meghan and Harry are doing this. What is eventually going to happen is someone is going to say, well, you may be selling, but we are not buying. Do I expect the British government to do anything? No, I do not, because they didn't do anything, not even when their nation was, well, being bombed
People were
and
killed
in the
were
middle of
killed
war.
horribly.
Yes, we are talking about a huge loss of life. And remember, rationing in the UK went on until I was born, and I was born 10 years after the war ended. So the consequences of the Second World War was with them, like for 10 years. It was terrible. And still, they would not do anything.
Mm.
Edward was still getting a check, every month from the family.
And I
No,
gotta tell you, this thing with the First Nations, people are not taking it seriously enough. Because these are chiefs that are expecting they in their minds, and they might feel horribly slighted if they think that that Harry has taken the piss and humiliate them in public like that. Because it's a different side of culture. Is talking about their honor, and according to the statement they put out, they truly believe that Harry was there in representation of the crown.
well, here's the thing, you're not just dealing with First Nations people. Canada has been very good about embracing not just the First Nations people, but the people of mixed blood, the Métis people as well, the people who are part European and part Indigenous. My mother's family is from Canada. They are Métis people. So I do not consider myself to be, because frankly, oh, come on. Who's going to take me for Native American? It's,
Nobody.
I think at some point you just have to
I mean,
say,
it's like it would be like thinking Megan is black.
Right. Exactly. There is a point at which you have to say, no one is going to make this cultural association unless I attempt to exploit it. So, no, I never say I'm Metis. No, my mother's family is. It's a very large percentage of the Canadian public, which means they're not just insulting the the First Nations people in terms of those who maintain tribal affiliations and keep that cultural link going. You've got a large percentage of people who simply have this in their DNA and may well become very irritated if
Yeah.
they feel that they are being used, exploited. It could be much more than anyone's bargained for. But it's also kind of scary in that Harry had no business going out there and telling the First Nations people that talks would continue. The Crown's doing this. He was speaking for other people. And those other people may have a completely different strategy for all of this, which is not to say that I believe that the Crown wishes to dismiss the First Nations people.
No, 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 but
It's
that's the
not,
whole point. Yeah,
but it should
but
be
the
their
whole point
choice. These things are not done by a couple of people over a cup of coffee.
no.
We're talking about nations, governments,
In
diplomats,
very
power.
delicate,
Yes,
culturally sensitive meetings.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, you have everybody involved, from diplomats to linguists, involved in dealing with preservation issues for First Nations people. It is, gosh,
So when I used to work as a diplomat, they would, before they sent us to a different country with a different culture, we would be taught cultural differences and what to do, what not to do. You can't sit
absolutely.
showing the sole of your feet. You can't cross your legs here. You can't use your left hand here. You can't rub the child's head. That those were no because for example, and I studied that the cultural differences is actually a very good book by a guy. I see if I can I find the title and send it to you because I actually had to read it. It's a guy who was a buyer for Kmart, and he went worldwide setting up this Kmart, major monster Kmart's, supermarkets. And he wrote a book about the cultural differences and how, like how he couldn't believe it. For example, he went to Mexico and he was told that the meeting would be at 12 p.m. and he was there at 5 to 12. And then it was like 3 o'clock and the Mexican guy hadn't shown up, and when he showed up, I mean, he was fuming, but Mexican guy showed up like there was. So he's like, don't expect promptness, in Latin American countries, which is true, they do things differently. So in order to, so it's an amazing thing about the cultural differences. And we have Harry, a man who wore a swastika, a man who's notoriously racist, calling his fellow soldiers such nasty things that he
Yes.
had to be sent to a cultural.
Oh, I heard those tapes. You can't get them anymore. They've purged them from the internet. But I have absolutely heard that stuff. Scary, scary stuff.
What
The
do you think is
only,
going to happen to the royal family if they don't act? Because people are going to get fed up. We're not back in the 1920s when they
oh, I
controlled the
think,
information.
now I don't have a crystal ball, but I do think there is a very good possibility that this could blow up all over them. All it takes is one difficult incident and a cover up. And suddenly you are going to find the Republicans, not just in the UK, but remember, you've got Republicans in Australia and New Zealand, people
Yeah.
that just, they want to break away. This is their point of view. Could the monarchy be brought down? Yes, absolutely. We know this. Other monarchies have been brought down in the past. Could this happen? I have no doubt that it could. I don't know if it will, but you could you could have the most ghastly scenario. And my guess is it would have to come from a misstep, well, a misstep by our friends in Montecito being covered up by the palace. I think that would be what would turn the tide. But once you start to consider that the royal family, Charles may be Harry's father, but he is also the king. And Charles may well have to decide, is he Harry's father or is he the King of England? Because that's what happened with Edward. Mary, and mind you, Mary was Edward's mother. Mary had to decide if she was Edward's mother or if she was the queen.
Yeah.
And well, in her case, she was the Dowager Queen. But in and she decided England first. And now, anybody who knows anything about the life of Mary knows that was the decision she was going to make. If you had cornered her when she was 5 years old, she probably would have made that decision. I don't think England has had very many monarchs. And remember, she was queen consort and not a
But
monarch
she
by
was
birth.
strong. She was a strong lady.
She took her responsibilities to
Seriously.
the nation very seriously, very
Like the,
seriously.
you know what? I think Queen Elizabeth II also took it seriously.
Yes, yes,
She
I
was
do.
so respected. Do you think that if she were alive, that these things would be happening right now with, because she was pretty, in many ways, she told Harry no.
I don't know. If she were alive right now, of course, she would be nearing 100.
Mm.
We have to keep that into the equation. Would she have the strength, the stamina, being so close to the edge of her life? Would she perhaps be influenced by other decisions? She was a religious woman.
Yeah.
Would she want to go to her grave having made peace with everyone with whom she could have made peace? Perhaps. It's really hard to say. I think she did the best she could with what she had. But remember, she also knew everything that had gone on with Edward and her father
Yeah.
George, that breach. She was there. By the time the Second World War rolled around, she was old enough to serve, and she did. So we know she was of a respectable age, and she knew what had taken place.
And she knew the consequences. But what I seen, I don't know about you, Sue, but I find that it's a missed opportunity that this was time for Parliament too, because this is a constitutional monarchy. This is not an absolute monarchy. There's a second reading for the amendment of the 1917 Treason Act that's going to be heard on June 14th in England by Bob Seeley, I think his name is. That's the second reading, and it's going ahead. That is to remove titles of princess and to amend the Treason Act, basically. So hopefully that goes through, because I don't see Charles acting to
No,
defend the prestige of the monarchy. And part of me thinks that's because he has a long tail. The Queen Elizabeth could do it because she was this is a woman nobody could throw a stone at. Nobody. I know people talk about Prince Philip having affairs, but to this day we still don't know which of what those affairs were. Because he was, if he had any, he was very, very, very discreet.
yes. And Elizabeth, it's very hard to find anything at all, uh, so much as a toe out of place. So, no, she was a woman who lived, well, she walked the talk,
Yeah,
basically.
I loved her so much. I kind of missed her. So you don't think that the current monarch has learned? Well, apparently Charles was very close to the Duke of Windsor.
Well, you can't say very close. He met him on a couple of occasions.
But they
He
used to
wrote,
write to each other. They
yes,
shared correspondence.
not a lot of letters, and they did not share close contact. I have no idea what motivated Charles because he was the one. who uh, he was the one who initiated that relationship. I expect, now remember, I just said I don't know for sure. I have a suspicion that it was Mountbatten,
Yeah.
Charles's uncle, to whom he was very close. I think he was the one who encouraged Charles to deal with the Duke of Windsor. And who knows why? Mountbatten was, well, I find him to be a deplorable human being. And trust me,
Disgusting.
pardon?
Disgusting.
I, he was just not someone that,
You don't invite him to your birthday parties, that's for sure.
oh Lord, I wouldn't invite him to my house. But he was a schemer too, and he had his own agendas. So I don't know what he might have thought would benefit him if Charles became close to the Duke of Windsor, but I do believe it was Mountbatten that tried to put that together. Were Edward and Charles close? No, no, they couldn't have been. They spent so little time in each other's company. But who knows? Who knows what the agenda was? Because Charles and Edward really didn't connect until very shortly before Edward's death. So,
Hmm.
and that was just, the luck of the draw, how old Charles was in relation to how old Edward was. Remembering that Charles was of the generation where he would have been considered, the grandchild,
Yeah.
someone Edward's age. So
Why do
I
you
don't
think
know.
Parliament is not interfering, Sue? Why do you think Parliament is
I
not
think
taking a
they
more
want
active
to
role?
blow it off as a family problem. I think Charles is not doing anything because he feels guilty because his marriage to Diana didn't work out. I think Charles feels guilt. I think he has I think he has affection for his sons, but I think he also knows he was not the best of fathers and probably has some guilt about that. But anyone who is a parent ends up saying, I could have been better. Most parents end up feeling very, very guilty by the time their children are adults, thinking, well, I could have done this, I could have done that. We second guess ourselves. So I think that's what's going on for Charles.
Also
He,
protecting Camilla. I think he's afraid that they're going to start attacking Camilla again because it's taking him so long for her to be mildly accepted, So I think that but what do you think? Do you think it's going to be different with William when William comes to power? Do you think there'll be a monarchy at the rate we're going? Because Parliament should have interfered when Harry talked to the with the chiefs. That is not even a family problem anymore because now they're talking on behalf of the monarchy.
yes, and that somebody should have slapped him back hard and fast. As for William, whether or not there is still a monarchy in William's time, I don't know. Uh, I do not predict the collapse of the monarchy. So when I say the monarchy could be brought down, I'm talking in terms of possibilities. In other words, does someone like Harry, does someone like Meghan have a possibility of doing this? And the answer is yes. Yes. A big enough scandal that is covered up by the royal family could bring them down. It
So
all
in other
depends
in other
on
words,
their
it wouldn't be Harry or Meghan, though. So it would be the royal family themselves who bring themselves down by
right,
covering up
by
for Harry and
covering
Meghan.
it up or
Meghan and
by
Harry are
not
idiots.
responding or by
Harry
not,
and Meghan are idiots.
well, they are.
You
But
know.
the problem is, I have a friend who always said, I would rather have a smart enemy than a stupid one, because at least you can rely on a smart enemy not to work against their own best interests. But a
Yes,
stupid enemy, you
such a
have
good
no idea what they're going to
saying.
do.
That is such a good saying. I'm going to steal it.
Oh, you be my guest. Because believe me, I've already stolen it from my friend. It's like a random idiot can do so much damage because you can't predict it. You have no idea what they're going to do next because it doesn't make sense. And you look at it and say, well, how could they do this? They brought themselves down, but they're stupid and they didn't see that one coming. It's, you see, the thing is, it's not the enemies you see coming that are a danger to you. You can prepare for them. It's the ones that you don't see coming. It's the ones that you don't take
But Harry
seriously.
and Meghan are pretty much declared enemies. So right now they're declared enemies, you know. And again, the royal family is not doing themselves any favor. If
No,
the
they
only
are.
part, the monarchy, the royal family right now are the only ones who can bring the monarchy down by
Yeah,
inaction.
I believe that. And I believe that when William's time comes, there will be the same clear break that there was between George and Edward. Oh, I think William will just say, I am not taking my brother's phone calls, which is what George said uh, regarding Edward. William will probably say, no, we can't come back to the UK, which is what George said
They have
about
to
Edward.
remove the titles.
He needed permission to return to the UK, which was important because nobody really, well, nobody. There were interests in Britain. Oswald Mosley and the fascist party in Britain absolutely wanted Edward back. He shared their worldview. So, sure, they wanted him back. But in terms of people within the establishment, they didn't want to see hide nor hair of Edward. They wanted him gone. Bahamas was fine. Antarctica would have suited them better. But they didn't have an outpost there then.
Yeah, you know what's so funny, because I don't know if you know this, but actually Parliament and the Prime Minister at the time urged King George V to make the Duke of Windsor, the Edward, to make him a private citizen. But the king refused because, and there's the letters. I actually did a video where I published a letter urging the king to turn him, because they were really outraged. Why are you giving him a royal title when he abdicated as king for that woman? And the
Yeah.
king refused, because some speculate that it was out of fear that if he turned him into a private citizen, he would be able to run as prime minister for office. You know, I
I
don't know if
don't
that.
think that was it. I think what it is what motivates every ruler to protect the interests of other rulers. I think that that was more a question of George looking around saying, well, if he abdicates and becomes a private citizen, I could be deposed and made a private citizen. They just don't want to create that precedent. Um, so, yeah, spilling the king's blood has always been considered a very dicey business because
Mhm.
any king who spills the blood of another king is opening the door to have his own blood spilled.
That's
So I think it was just self preservation. But given the fact that William would be looking at a different time, um, I think William will just make the break and that's it. And just let his brother go do whatever he wants to do, but make it clear that he is not coming back to the UK. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you can expel one of your own citizens.
Yes, you
It,
can. You can be. You can become persona non grata. That's what that's what they call it, a persona non grata, or they can come in and go. I know because I work with some people, and it was, but this was in a European country, and the person was can could only come, him and his family could only come when work issues, but they could never come as, like tourism or anything like that. It had to be with like a work, it had to be for a limited period of time, and they had to stay in a house. They couldn't just go wandering around like a tourist. No, no, no. Even the family, so, and most of the time they, when he wanted to bring, I remember his family, they said, why, what for? This is not a tourist thing. It would be you're here for 3-day meetings and you're out, and it's
that's
all.
interesting.
Yeah, you
I,
can be persona non grata.
Well, I certainly hope the UK doesn't do that to Harry, because then we'll be stuck with him, and I'd rather we weren't. Um,
Well,
I'm,
talking about that, before we go, before I know it's been an hour, so thank you. But
I
what
know
do you
you're
think is
fine.
going to happen with the visa? People say that he's not going to be deported. I have a feeling that he might.
It depends. These days, you once information is out there and within the public sphere, you can't just say, well, we're going to do what we want to do. There is that level of accountability to the public. Could they revoke his visa? Of course they could, assuming that there are lies in it. And I believe there are. I believe that in his visa, he denied drug use, um, which would fly in the face of not just his own statements, but the public record. He was placed in a drug rehab facility. You
Yeah.
know, it's
It's
gosh, it's really
everywhere.
hard.
It's everywhere, Sue. He even did
It
that thing
is.
with Gabor Mate.
How can you deny the drug use? So could could he be deported? Yes. Could they fall back on something else and claim that he should really have been on a diplomatic visa, on a marriage to a U.S. citizen visa? Who knows? That for all I know, they could come up with these special circumstances Prince Harry visa. I don't know what is going to happen. I do know if the lies come out, if they are exposed, there is going to be a huge backlash.
Yeah.
As well, there should be, because people, um, friends of the family, right now, um, I'm thinking my friends of the family are dealing with a relative who has recently been deported back to Mexico simply because the employment visa ran out. Meanwhile, his wife, his children are all living here legally in the United States. They've split the family. And if a person who is not wealthy can be kicked out of the United States, separated from his family, while Harry can come in simply because he's got money. You think people are going to sit still for that, for special privileges? Um, Now,
Not
someone
in
like
the United
Harry,
States. Not in the United States. The United States is founded that we're all people like somebody who's worked for things, like, oh, the success story, the American dream, because it's also happened to Kelly Rutherford, that girl from Gossip, that she actually turned her ex-husband, and he ended up having his visa was revoked. And now she's lost the children because he's living in Monaco, and because she accused him or something, and they revoked his visa, and he had to leave. And because he can't come to the United States, they agreed to the 50% joint custody. So they were spending time over in Monaco. And in one of the times she brought them to the United States, she refused to send them back. And he started a lawsuit under the Hague Convention, and she lost the kids. So it's
it
gonna
can be
be.
very dicey. So I guess the bottom line is I can't predict one way or another. What I can say is if the information turns out to be what we think will be included in that visa application, I think the US government is going to have to act, which is probably going to mean deporting Harry, or they are going to face backlash,
Oh
one
yeah,
or the other. And that is as it should be.
yeah.
It shouldn't be rules for me and not for thee. That's not how a free society works.
And just
So
one last question: do you think the
sure.
judge is inclined to let it make public because he asked for the documents?
I think if there are discrepancies, because I believe that was what was put out by the court, that if there are discrepancies, it will be released. So
Oh,
that we got to hope. But will it get out? The fact is, once it gets into the courts, it will be seen not just by the judge, but by a number of lawyers, by a number of clerks within the court, by a number of individuals. We got to hope somebody
I hope it
will
leaks.
talk. Well, that's how things get out, by leaks. Will it show up on Reddit or Quora or whatever? Yeah, I bet it will. So, yes, but for the moment, I'm still wondering what Harry is doing in the United States, because we're 4 years into the game at this point. 4 years. That is an unusually long visa to be given to someone who is clearly not working, so it can't be a working visa.
No, it's in a spousal visa that he's in.
And at some point, when you come over as a spouse, there is an expectation that you are going to request permanent status, or
Yeah.
you are going to start moving toward a green card or citizenship.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
thanks for coming, Sue.
Well,
Don't
thank
hang up
you
when
for
we well,
having
don't
me.
hang up when we finish the recording. But thanks for being here. And this has been such a good video because it's incredible how you pointed out how history literally is repeating itself.
And we're
Literally,
watching it. Remember, my generation grew up with the Cold War. We
yeah.
know a Cold War when we see one.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the reasons that some of the most vocal critics of Harry and Meghan are people of my generation, the
Yeah,
baby boomers, because Harry and Meghan are currently engaged in a Cold War
yeah.
with the
I mean,
British royal
I'm
family.
55. I'm
And
55. So I
it,
and
it's it is what it is, and we know what a Cold War looks like.
yeah, and
We
what idiots look
know
like,
that.
and it's and also we've seen the changing times, I believe, when we've seen governments act, people act, to now this non-action when there's zero accountability. It's like you're the evil person if you make somebody accountable.
Yeah, we end up looking around at ourselves in the middle of a cancel culture. You have to be so scared about what you say or do, and it's something that Meghan has been able to exploit for her own benefit, because she does not hesitate to play the race card every time things don't go her way. And apparently, of course, she is now saying, well, she was bullied. Bully is another one of her terms. Anytime things don't go down the way they want them to, they were bullied. Well, I'm sorry, that's not reality. That is not how it works. If anything, what we're looking at is people who are bullies saying, I'm the victim. So
It's actually quite disgusting, Sue.
it
But
truly is.
anyways, thanks for coming here, Sue,
Well,
and
thanks
please
for
keep
having
subscribing.
me.
Sue. Are you kidding? Ah, you're a dream come true. I am such a big fan. So thanks, and people should go and subscribe to your channel, of course. And
Well,
hopefully Sue will accept our invitation and join us at the Royal Mass. Beautiful people. So you might see her once in a while when
I
she has.
would love to. All right. Thanks so much. And I will hopefully touch base with you very soon. All right.
Thanks so
Thank you for
much.
having me.
Bye bye, sweetie.